is a person who is a lawful permanent resident. This is a U.S. person. Those grounds are vague. They are rarely used. Essentially, they are a form of punishment and retaliation for the exercise of free speech. We think it won't fly in federal court. We think it won't fly in immigration court. And it certainly should not fly in the court of public opinion.
Why not raise that today? The judge gave you the option.
All right. Thank you, Ramzi. Next, I'd like to introduce Bahid Azmi, the legal director of the Center of Constitutional Rights, also a member of Mahmoud's legal team.
Can you spell your name, please?
Bahir Azmi, B-A-H-E-R, A-Z-M-Y, from the Center for Constitutional Rights. Mr. Khalil's detention has nothing to do with security. It is only about repression. The United States government has taken the position that it can arrest, detain, and seek to deport a lawful permanent resident exclusively because of his peaceful, constitutionally protected activism. In this case, activism in support of Palestinian human rights and an end to the genocide in Gaza. The government takes the position that because the Secretary of State finds his dissent unacceptable or contrary to U.S. foreign policy, he can be deported. As Ramzi suggested, it's largely unprecedented, save for ugly historical precedents, including the Red Scare and McCarthyism. That's what we're talking about. We're also talking about a period of repression that the Center for Constitutional Rights knows well, following 9/11, when we were in the courts trying to get people out of secret detention. One thing that's different now is the legal infrastructure is so much stronger, and everyone out here on the streets knows that we cannot hide in the face of this amount of repression. We will be fighting in the courts and fighting in the streets to bring Mahmoud home and prevent this level of repression from spreading to many others, as the administration has threatened to do.
Why not argue the merits in court today, sir? The judge invited repeatedly.
Thank you, Bahid. Now we'll hear from Professor Joseph Howley, an associate professor at Columbia University.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Howley, H-O-W-L-E-Y, and I'm an associate professor of classics at Columbia University. The last time I spoke at a press conference was April 18th. That day, police officers in crowd control gear entered our campus for the first time in decades and carried off dozens of students who were peacefully and quietly encamped on one of the enclosed lawns in front of our library, threatening no one. As I watched this unfold in horror, I was asked to speak at an emergency press conference alongside Mahmoud, who had just been asked to negotiate on behalf of the encampment. It is always dangerous to speak in public for Palestinian rights, safety, and freedom with your face uncovered and your name declared. You can be sure you will be harassed, doxxed, terrorized. People will try to get you fired from your job. For speaking here, I will receive a new round of death threats, slander, complaints to my employer. When I step down from here, I will publish these remarks to protect me from the inevitable attempts to misrepresent my words. And Mahmoud, as a student negotiator, took these same risks and many more. Mahmoud is a man of decency, honor, and kindness. He has distinguished himself in his work as an advocate and negotiator, as someone committed to peaceful resolution of difficult situations. He is a consummate diplomat in his disposition and his character. What the Trump government is doing to Mahmoud is obscene. It is unreasonable, intolerable, unconstitutional. So why do they think they can get away with it? The Trump administration is betting that Americans will happily look the other way as one more Palestinian is victimized here on American soil. They are betting that when you hear Mahmoud's name or the word Palestinian, the parts of you that make you a thinking and rational and caring person will switch off, and you will believe the worst about him, and you will turn a blind eye to these grave violations of his rights. And after what I've seen over the last year and a half, I'm not sure they're wrong. Anti-Palestinian groups have spent all year casually leveling the most dangerous accusations on the flimsiest grounds, and members of our own community have repeated them. Don't like seeing a kafia? Call them a terrorist and call the cops. Don't like their views? Call them anti-Semitic and get them expelled. Don't like that your Jewish colleague has the chutzpah to say free Palestine? Report him for Jew hatred to a university task force. Don't like seeing a broad and diverse movement of courageous young people standing together against the ethnic cleansing of Gaza? Call your friends in the government and send the feds to their door. As an educator, it disgusts me that anyone who wants to be taken seriously in association with a university would deal so ignorantly with language and truth. But more than that, I am ashamed as a Jewish person that this kind of slander has found currency in some parts of my own community in service of the racist and anti-Semitic Trump agenda. Trump's claim that this atrocity combats anti-Semitism is insulting. We will not take lectures on anti-Semitism from segregationists and neo-Nazis. We will not allow a white supremacist president and his party to claim the mantle of Jewish safety as they shred the Constitution and spin outlandish legal theories to justify the suppression of dissent and the brutalization of those who oppose war and apartheid. One of the most insidious forms of prejudice toward Jews is the trope of dual allegiance, which suggests that we Jews, because of our ethnicity or religion, have secret political commitments at odds with the communities we live in, that we are not to be trusted, that you should always believe the worst about us. When Donald Trump sneers at globalists, this is what he means. And when I see people unquestioningly trafficking in the wildest assertions about Mahmoud just because he is Palestinian, I hear the exact same kind of prejudice that drove generations of my own family from their homes in Europe. Anyone who spread the lies about Mahmoud that resulted in his detention should be ashamed. And if you find yourself believing whatever someone tells you about Mahmoud just because he is Palestinian or because he spoke up against a murderous war that you somehow still support, I can only implore you to scrutinize your own soul. Why are we here? Because we want our friend back. But we are also here because what happens to Mahmoud could happen to any of us. If they can strip the green card from a lawful permanent resident, they can do whatever they want to a citizen. If you're waiting for permission to think of this as a crisis, here it is. What has been done to Mahmoud goes far beyond whether or not you agree with the cause of Palestinian liberation. Where exactly are we in the poem that begins, "When they came for the communists, I did not speak out"? Well, they've already come for the asylum seekers. They've come for the migrant families. Now they've come for Mahmoud Khalil. It's not a very long poem. So how far down the list do you think you are? I have been proud to stand as a Jew beside Mahmoud Khalil and call for a free and just and peaceful Israel-Palestine. It is my honor now to stand before you and call on what remains of the United States government to do the right thing and free Mahmoud Khalil. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. Next, we'll have Joshua Draytel from the law firm representing Mahmoud.
And this is also on behalf of Amy Greer, who's in our firm, who has handled this case and will continue to handle this case, but unfortunately could not be here today. And the principles at issue in this case are, of course, of extraordinary importance, and my colleagues have laid that out here and in court. But as important as those principles are, our commitment to the case, the whole team's commitment to the case, and Amy's commitment to this case, is also about the human being, Mahmoud Khalil. He is a person who is loved, who is respected, who has earned that through his conduct and his commitment to his community and to all of us. We thank the people beyond the cameras who are here for their support, and we appreciate it, Mahmoud appreciates it, and ultimately the rest of this country and the world will appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Professor Nadia El-Hedj, a professor of anthropology at Barnard and Columbia.
Hello, my name is Nadia El-Hedj. Last name is Abuelhaj. So how did we get here? How did we get to the point where Mahmoud Khalil, a mild-mannered and thoughtful Palestinian political activist, a legal permanent resident of the U.S. who has not been charged, let alone convicted of a crime, can be picked up outside his home and shipped to a Louisiana detention center. That the Secretary of State and the President can name him as the first of many who will be rounded up and deported for what is, in fact, political dissent. This is a witch hunt of an order we have not seen since the McCarthy era. Then the archetypal threat to America was the allegedly communist Jew. Now it is the allegedly anti-Semitic Palestinian. But lest the Democratic Party feel self-satisfied as the Republican administration takes a sledgehammer to our basic constitutional rights, this did not begin 2 months ago. Beginning in the fall of 2023, most Democrats at local, state, and national levels joined in the maligning of Palestinian and pro-Palestinian demonstrators. They labeled the movement anti-Semitic as operating in support of terrorism, ignoring the reality on the ground to which these students were responding. The urgency that you saw, the rage even of student demonstrators last year was driven by a commitment to the urgency of the situation, the need to stop the genocide in Gaza. The Democrats, however, crawled into bed with MAGA Republicans quite clearly in congressional hearings that began in the fall of 2023, when university presidents began to be hauled before the committee, as if the hearings were actually about anti-Semitism. The party of Charlottesville, the party of Nazi salutes and support for Germany's neo-Nazi party, the AfD, is not concerned with anti-Semitism. And no Democrat that has aligned with them can be taken seriously on that front. Insofar as you, our Democratic politicians, continue to refer to Mahmoud Khalil's speech as abhorrent, presumably while defending his right to say what he does, that is, presumably while defending his right to be abhorrent, you are part of the problem. Stop demonizing student activists who are demonstrating to save Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank from ethnic cleansing and total annihilation. Stop replicating the crimes of McCarthyism. And here I mean not just the criminalization of certain forms of political speech. More fundamentally, I mean stop replicating the crime of demonizing an entire group of people as dangerous, as a threat, as abhorrent even. Then it was Jews, now it's Palestinians. Free Mahmoud now and stop the witch hunt against other students.
Thank you, Professor. Next, I'd like to bring up Shaza Aboushi Dalal, one of the staff attorneys at CLEAR, who will be reading a statement by Mahmoud's wife.
Hi everyone, my name is Shaza Aboushi Dalal, that's SHEZZA-ABBOUSHI-DALLAL. I am a staff attorney with the CLEAR project and one of Mahmoud Khalil's attorneys, and I will be reading a statement on behalf of Mahmoud Khalil's wife, who does not wish to be named. My husband was kidnapped from our home, and it's shameful that the United States government continues to hold him because he stood for the rights and lives of his people. I demand his immediate release and return to our family. His disappearance has devastated our lives. Every day without him is filled with uncertainty, not just for me, but for our entire family and community. Our loved ones are struggling with the pain and fear of his sudden absence. And yet, we are not alone. So many who know and love Mahmoud have come together, refusing to stay silent. Their support is a testament to his character and to the deep injustice of what is being done to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaza. We're going to bring up some of Mahmoud's legal team to answer questions for you all. I will be calling on the people and letting you all know who will go first. Okay, questions?
How long can they hold him? Let's say if you win the habeas, let's say he doesn't. Like, what is the procedure?
Repeat the question.
How long will
You
they?
need to. Sorry, you need to. Can you step back and can you step close to both of you close to the?
He's already asked a question. Let's get somebody else.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Okay, how long can they hold him? How long can they hold him?
Look, we are seeking to bring him back. We're seeking to have him released. And we're going to do that whether it's in federal court or an immigration court. There are limits to how long a person can be held in immigration court. But frankly, that's irrelevant because we are going to ask for him to be released as expeditiously as possible. And we will do that in any court that will hear us.
Why couldn't that be done today? And can you just respond to the government's claims that this is about his views not being in line with national security? Can you legally speak to us about that?
Yeah, the government has basically admitted that they're punishing him for his views that are contrary to the government's views. And that's just an obvious piece of authoritarian logic that we cannot tolerate as long as we live in a democracy. It's totally unacceptable for him and for others.
The government's attorney said in the courtroom that the proper venue, the proper jurisdiction is either Louisiana or New Jersey, but not New York. Why?
The government is claiming, and this is really a question for the government, but the government is claiming that because at the time he filed a habeas corpus petition in this court, he was already in New Jersey. They had already moved him to New Jersey as part of their plan, again, to move him 1,000 miles away to Louisiana, to take him away from this court, from his lawyers, from his support network. And of course, the goal in all of this is to silence not just Mahmoud, but to silence anyone who will speak in defense of Palestinian lives and rights. And clearly, as you can see by the thousands of people who have come out, not just today, but this past week, that is backfired. People are not silenced. People are not bowed in any way, shape, or form. And this idea that the movement in support of Palestinian lives is somehow driven and supported mainly by foreigners and non-citizens and individuals who are marginalized is clearly false. It is an American movement, and of course there are non-citizens and green card holders as well. But it is mainstream, as you can see from the diverse crowd that has come out, not just here today, but campuses nationwide for the past year.
The government says they have flyers. Do you think he planned it?
Yesterday, the White House press secretary made allegations against your client that he organized protests where Hamas propaganda was distributed. Can you guys address that?
The government's position is that Mahmoud has views that are similar to Hamas, namely that Mahmoud believes in Palestinian human rights and the end to an ongoing genocide. And it is for that reason, as the White House and the Department of Homeland Security have said, that he has been arrested, detained, and potentially removed. So it's their disagreement with his viewpoint, not any remotely scintilla of security threat that's driving this. Again, it's about repression. It's not about security.
I would add that, whatever flyers the White House spokesperson may have been talking about, that has certainly not been the government's position in court. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that the White House spokesperson says a lot of things that are unsubstantiated, not just on this case. I would pay attention to what they actually, put forward in court.
Can you speak to what Mahmoud is doing, how he's been in Louisiana?
As you can imagine, these are very difficult circumstances. Mahmoud and his wife, the last thing they expected was for something like this to happen. They had every reason to expect stability. He's a lawful permanent resident. She's a U.S. citizen. They're about to welcome their firstborn child next month. That's what they were thinking about, not this scenario where he's abducted, coming home at night, and rendered to a location 1,000 miles away by the U.S. government on account of his speech. In light of that, Mahmoud, of course, is a fighter. He's been a prominent advocate for Palestinian rights. He's equally unbowed. He's in good spirits considering these circumstances, and he looks forward to being back here at home in New York.
What are the immediate next steps? Immediate next steps?
The question is about immediate next steps. We will be filing amended papers demonstrating joined by our colleagues from the ACLU and the New York Civil Liberties Union, filing amended papers that substantiate in more detail the unlawful nature of his detention, and thereafter will pursue an expedited schedule to have the court hear his demand that his detention is unlawful and that he should be released. And we will also be dealing with the government's claim that this court is not the proper venue, and largely at the same time over the next week.
What would you say understanding legally why this is? You're saying what they're saying publicly versus what's happening in court.
Yeah, that's what
two different things. What is the legal reason here for what the government is explaining to you why they're doing?
How are they justifying it?
Yeah, the government, as far as we understand it, is relying on a rarely used provision in immigration law to justify the detention of a lawful permanent resident and his placement and removal proceeding. It is a provision that basically says that if the Secretary of State determines that a non-citizen's presence or activity in this country poses a serious risk of adverse foreign policy consequences potentially, that person can be processed for removal. Now, of course, that provision is not only rarely used, it is certainly not intended by Congress to be used to silence dissent. In other words, the times that it has been used to, for example, prohibit the visas for folks who have, people who have interfered with democracy in their home countries, former officials. Those are the kinds of scenarios where you see that law used. It is not intended to be used to silence pro-Palestinian speech or any other speech that the government happens to dislike. And for that reason, we believe that this case is not going to set the precedent that the government wants it to set, whether it's in federal court or an immigration court. And you already know just by looking behind you that it's not having the effect that the government wants it to have on, people's solidarity with Palestinians.
Okay, last question. Last question.
She's confirmed that he sent emails to university administrators asking to be protected the day before he was arrested, and what is the university's responsibility?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question was whether we can confirm that he sent an email to the president of Columbia University the night before he was arrested and detained to basically put the university on notice that he was feeling unprotected by the university and that he was worried about detention by ICE and doxing and actions by private actors. He was in fear for his life and well-being. That is accurate. He did send that email to the head of Columbia University, and I think his email raises an important question. This is a university that has spent the better part of the last year talking about its duty to protect students and to keep them safe. But in a scenario where numerous students are being approached by ICE on Columbia's campus, and one Columbia student, Mahmoud Khalil, has been effectively disappeared by U.S. government agents, again, on Columbia's property, the university has been remarkably absent and silent.
Student at Florida, one more question, please. Student at Florida, one more question, please.
Thank you all. We're going to wrap up here. For any questions regarding details about today's speakers, you can come to me or Jen here. And I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank all of the people who are out there in the crowd listening. And I want to remind everyone that the family has asked for privacy at this time. Thank you.